The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas varied as sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Walter Dean Myers, the famous author and now the National Ambassador for Youth Literature appointed by the Library of Congress. Glad to have you with us today, Walter.
I'm glad to be here, sir.
Now, tell us about this National Ambassador, how it was determined, and what do you do in that role?
Well, the National Ambassador promotes literacy and particularly promotes literacy for youth. And what I was elected by the Librarian of Congress and the Children's Book Council, and they had about a committee of 12 people selecting someone, and I was lucky enough to be, I hope lucky enough, to be selected. And what I'm expected to do is to talk about literacy and about reading. And what I want to do is to change the idea of reading as a pleasant pastime. I want to change the idea of books can take you to far off places and get it back to what's needed in the community. And what's needed in the community is the understanding that if you can't read well in this world, you're going to have a hard life.
No question about that. But do you go to individual schools, you go to school systems, you go to colleges, you go to community groups, or all of those?
All of those. I've been, so far, I've been to schools and across the country. I speak to school groups. Tomorrow I will speak to librarians and teachers, and I will speak to people trying to get them to be realistic about reading. Now, reading has changed in my lifetime. When I was a young man, my dad, who did not read or write, but he could always make a living. He could work, he was a strong man, and he could always make a living. That doesn't happen today.
Not anymore.
Not in today's. Not only that, but a job, no matter what job you have, may not last more than 5 or 7 years. I mean, you know, with technology moving so quickly, the job you think is a lifetime job today.
That doesn't happen anymore.
That doesn't happen anymore. Absolutely.
So when you talk with them, the teachers, the librarians, do you actually bring books and read from some of the books, or do you try to get them to conceptualize what books are about?
I want them to know what books are about, but I also want them to know some of the research. Some of the research, a great deal of the research says that children at the age of 5 are beginning to school at such different levels. And one level, some kids are beginning school with a vocabulary of 3,000 to 5,000 words, while other kids are beginning with a vocabulary of 12 to 14,000 words. Now, this is a gap that 5-year-olds are facing.
Now, why does that gap occur?
It's
socioeconomic in part, but still there's something going on.
There's something going on. You know, when you have multi-generational unemployment and underemployment, everybody recognizes the loss of the paycheck. But what they're not recognizing is the loss of the vocabulary of the workplace. So what happens when the auto worker went home? He's worked in the factory all day. He came home. His language was a great deal of his language was the language of the workplace. And so his children heard words like tires and carburetors and what have you. And his children heard what other workers were doing over the weekend and what their concerns were. And now, when you have these single-family homes, when you have the people not working, the family vocabulary might be um, uh, as little as 40,000 words total, while in a professional family, the total vocabulary might be as much as 200,000 words. Now, children are picking up language from home. And if there's no language being spoken at home, the only thing that a parent is doing is watching TV, there's no language input.
Well, don't you get language from TV?
Not that much. You get less language from primetime TV than you get from a picture book, and it's really unbelievable. And all of the research is saying that the kids are beginning at that with that deficiency. Now, when they begin with that deficiency, how do you make it up? Well, you make it up by reading with children, not just to them, but with them. You share the reading experience.
Now, when you say reading with them, you'll read something and they'll read the same thing and then you talk about it? Is that what you mean by reading with them?
Exactly. And you can do that not only with books, but you can do that with catalogs. You can take a child shopping and say to that child, look, you find the bread in the store. You find the cereal that you want, and you read the labels, and you tell me how much fat is in this thing. You go to the window, and look out the window, and tell me what the weather is like and what we should wear. Now, the parents don't have to be well-educated people to.
But there does have to be some will. Let's say when a single parent or two-parent family, there has to be some will for the children to interact with words, with ideas, rather than to say, shut up and be quiet and go watch television.
Exactly. And I don't think that I'm going to be able to convince every single person. It's not going to happen. But what might happen is if you change the environment. When I was a kid, which was a few years ago, when someone would come to the house, I would be called, Walter, come read for Uncle John. Come read for.
They were showing you off because you were smart.
They were showing me off, but this was a common thing.
It was pretty common.
It was fairly common, and you.
But that was not before, but that was at the beginning of the age of television.
Right.
But now, when you come in, well, let's go look at the show. Let's
right.
Look
exactly.
at American Idol.
Exactly.
And, as I said, Moynihan talked about defining deviancy down. We've lowered our levels of expectation. But then there's a social class function in it. Many of the reformers are saying, never mind these social conditions, just demand that they pass the test. But they can't pass the test if they don't have the experience to be able to relate to the information. You can't beat knowledge into anybody.
You can't beat knowledge. And you can't impose knowledge on people. But it's a cooperative effort, and we need to get serious about it. But we also have a history of that. When the war ended in 1865, you had all of these people, 95%, who were illiterate. But there was a feeling within the community, and
you're talking about African Americans,
right?
Right.
And there was an understanding that education was the key. And not everybody took it. Not everybody went for it, but enough people went for it to make huge changes in African American society.
And they founded black colleges.
And they founded black college. And in those colleges, were near me in Harpers Ferry, there was Storer College. Were in Storer College, when it first was founded, had both children and adults attending, because it was a learning atmosphere.
Well, one of the things that I'm sure you do when you talk with people is to give them some of the excitement that comes out of reading. It's exciting to learn about what happened in Reconstruction. It's exciting to learn what happened when the migrations came to the city. Now, how do you choose what you're going to write about in your books?
What I do is I look at the children and try to see what do they need. And one of the things I'm sure that they need is an understanding of who they are and what they are capable
Well,
of.
how do you do that?
Well, what I've been doing most recently is using photographs. Now, for example, I just put together a collection of photographs, of some 200 photographs, in which I'm showing African Americans working. Now, the normal depiction of African Americans working is in cotton fields and in the rice paddies and what have you. But I have people working as mechanics, as oyster fishermen.
You mean during the time of slavery and Reconstruction?
No, after.
After, okay.
Right. We're doing Reconstruction and afterwards. So I have photographs of people as jockeys. Mm-hmm. I have, I have all those people, those aviators from the 30s, mm-hmm. And many of them who were mechanics. I have pictures of people doing every kind of job, doctors, lawyers. I have an entire section on barbers, mm-hmm. and making the connections between the people owning their own barber shops and then moving into politics. Mm-hmm. So I bring those pictures to schools. I bring those, I'm going to put together an exhibit for the fall of either this year or next year. So what I try to do is I also have documents showing what people have accomplished. And there's this fantasy that African Americans haven't accomplished anything.
Well, I think the world and the African American world knows what we've done in entertainment.
Right.
And that's the big thing. What we've done in sports, Joe Louis and Jackie Robinson and Jesse Owens. A little bit about what we've done in politics, Frederick Douglass,
right.
Adam Powell, and Martin Luther King. But what you're talking about is the kind of activity that generates a middle class.
Yes.
A class
yes.
that is able to sustain itself through its own skills.
Absolutely. And when I began collecting photographs, I began to see this middle class. People working as grooms, and people working in these various positions. In medicine, it was so interesting for me to find black doctors during the Civil War. Mm. It was just phenomenal. But you have to have the evidence, and you have to have the documents and the photographs to bring to the schools, to present to young people, and to present to their teachers, because the teachers don't know it either.
Oh, well, that's true. They're only a few generations,
they're only
years past. But now, in terms of your books, you choose topics.
Right.
One of them is here is called All the Right Stuff. How did you decide to do this, and what's it about?
Okay, this is a book about the social contract. I was talking.
Now, for the audience, what is the social contract?
Social contract is the agreements that people have come up with in the past, Rousseau, Locke, and Hobbes, of how people should live and what their relationships to government should be.
In a positive sense.
In a positive sense. And these decisions by philosophers, primarily philosophers, which are then adopted by governments, affect all of us. And they affect us in so many ways. And young people just don't know about these things. And if you don't know about them, you're going to suffer.
Now, when you say don't know about it, they don't know the facts of them, or they don't know the spirit or the direction of it?
They don't know the spirit and direction of them. And they don't understand that there are agreements made between the government and the population that is going to affect them. For example, the laws. How are the laws derived? How are the laws put together? Then you're going to have two guys in the back seat, back room of some place in Washington, D.C., discussing welfare reform. And this is talking about the relationship between government and the people. This whole idea of health care is about the relationship.
Now, how do you say that to kids? What kind of language do you use to get that across to kids?
All right, so what I have here is a young boy who has to work, who's working in the soup kitchen. And the older man is teaching him how to make soup, and he's talking to him about the social contract. And he's talking to him he's talking to him in a very plain language, and he's talking to him in a language that every teenager is going to recognize. And he's going to give him examples from the community of people who come to this soup kitchen now about how the social contract affects them.
See, this is very interesting because in the present presidential primaries, many of the Republicans are saying that the government shouldn't do things for people, shouldn't provide food stamps, shouldn't provide subsidies, although they don't say anything about subsidies for farmers.
Right, exactly.
That, on the other side of it. The philosophy of doing something for someone else is sometimes difficult to get over when people are in the bottom of the pit and are scrambling to get out.
Exactly.
That's what happens with some of the gangs in the lower-income neighborhoods. They keeping each other down, trying to be the top of the heap there. How do you get that across in literature? How do you get across the fact that we can move together?
Well, I have all the right stuff coming out. My next book is about how we try to keep each other down, you know, and it's about two young boys, one Latino, one African American, and there are people trying to stop them from being smart on one hand and fast on the other hand. The Latino boy is a middle distance runner. And they begin to understand that why they're trying to be stopped is because it's like the crabs in the basket. Every time one crab crawls out, the other crabs want to pull them back in again. And we have been doing this for years, and we need to stop. So these two boys who are being bullied and and people are trying to stop them, this little Latino boy from being a racer, they come to realize that the people who are trying to stop them are just as desperate as they are to get out of this thing, but they don't have a way. And rather than work together, what they're doing is trying to stop the others. When I walk into a school and I have to put my attaché case on my bag through a metal detector, I'm saying, this is not a place for learning. When I walk into a school and I have to walk through a metal detector as if, you know, I may be smuggling a weapon in.
Yeah, but the fact is, the reason why they do that is the kids bring in weapons.
Exactly.
Now, how would you handle that without the metal detectors? What would you do?
I don't know how.
As a commentary, you're right, you're affronted. Right. But in a specific, the question is, how do you handle that? and that gets into some larger social policies like gun control,
Exactly.
like the way in which law enforcement is unevenly enforced. So I guess those are the kind of things you work on. Now, you started out as a journalist and became a writer.
Yes.
Now, why did you do that?
Well, you had a magazine.
We did at New York University, Black Creation.
Yeah, you had a magazine, Black Creation, at NYU, and that was back in the 70s. And I submitted some stories there that were published. And you know what it did for me was because my education was not that good, but what it did for me to have those stories published, it made me think of myself in a different way. And all I needed was to be able to think of myself as someone who could accomplish something. And that Black Creation did it for me.
Well, which leads to the next point. You were talking about children's literature and reading. What about children's literature and children writing themselves? Is that in your program?
Yes, it is. I worked with some kids in Texas, Irving, Texas, over the internet, which was just a fantastic program. I worked with 10 boys, and those 10 boys worked with 10 younger boys. So the boys I was working with were from 13 to 15, and they worked with kids from 8 to 12. And I gave them a writing project. I told them how to go about writing this writing project, and I worked with these boys, and they had a very successful program. I got a letter from a kid, a 13-year-old, a little soccer player from New Jersey, and he said he wanted to write, and I worked with him, and we published a book together. And next year, I hope to start a magazine primarily aimed at boys. And I hope, if I can get the funding together, to put out a quarterly magazine, perhaps through one of the colleges in New Jersey. So what I want to get these kids doing is writing as well as reading.
And of course, with the emphasis now on improving performance, this is a good way of doing it. Basically, you don't improve performance by, as I said, by beating people over the head and drilling them. You improve them by involving them in the process.
Involving them in the process and letting them know that they can do this.
That's exactly that.
Let them know that you can do this, and this is how. Parents can help, and this is how. And this is what my mission will be.
Well, you're doing a great job with it. Now, the question is now, what happens next year? Will you still be the national ambassador, or are they going to have another national ambassador?
I'll be national ambassador for 2 years.
Congratulations.
Right. I was up at a school in Harlem. It's a Catholic school, St. Al's, on 132nd Street. And
St. Aloysius.
Yes. And there was a little boy there who asked me the same question. He says, how long will you be? And he was 9 years old. And I said, I'm going to be national ambassador for 2 years. And you know what he said to me? He said, well, if you play this thing right, maybe you can stretch it out.
Very good. That was very, very, very good.
Yeah.
Now, some of the themes that you've developed have to do with uplifting and understanding. What about some of the themes of courage? The Tuskegee Airmen, for example, which overcame stereotypes. How do you develop those kind of themes in children's literature, the theme of courage?
One of the things that you have to do is to convince the editors that this happens. I did a book with Bill Miles on black soldiers in World War I, which was a fascinating book.
The Men of Bronx, yeah.
Yeah, right. He had done the documentary, and together we did a book on the 369th. Now I'm putting together a book on the blacks who flew with the Ethiopians in the Italian-Ethiopian War.
Yeah, Colonel Hubert Julian.
Hubert Julian and then John Robinson.
Yeah.
I was in a shop and John Robinson's nephew gave me photographs. And one of the things that really struck me with the Tuskegee thing that people are not talking about is the age of those flyers. I was looking at the ages of those flyers, and when you see the pictures of them, or you see them later on.
As you know, I was one of them.
Right.
I was 21 years old.
Yeah, and I'm looking at these guys. I said, these are young men just out of their teens, and they were officers, and they were flyers, and they were aviators, and they were. To tell this story is amazing, and it has not yet been told it's been told from the viewpoint of individuals.
But the social context.
The social context.
Today on African American Legends, we've been talking with Walter Dean Myers, who's the National Ambassador for Youth Literature, and we're going to have everybody in America reading and reading better and writing better. Thanks for being with us today, Walter.
Thank you, sir.